Welcome back to Music Talk from the North State. Today I'm here with Grant Parks, who is working here at KZFR 90.1, which is a radio station we call the Zephyr here in Chico, California. He's also a Chico State alum. What I want to talk to you about is the aspiring professional and the aspiring business and the people that are artists. Why does this all matter? Why do we all care? I'm glad that I get to be here actually at the location here at the radio station and talk to somebody who's been doing it, who's come from the world of being a student and then going into our business and gets music and cares about music like the rest of us. Radio in the 1990s and 2000s and the late 80s, as I learned it, was how we caused record sales. And then everybody thought, if there's not a record sale, then why do you need radio? Well, they're wrong. I think you're completely wrong. Radio is your community. It is your region, it is your market, it is the people that are around you. They're the people that are you in a lot of ways, that want to help you, and that are trying to give a gift to their listeners that comes from their scene and their culture and so forth. So what do you give to radio, and what you need for radio for is being part of a culture and part of a scene that is part of a story. And I think that's the opportunity that I'm glad that you joined me to talk about today. Hey Grant, you went to school, and what did you study?
I studied philosophy over at Chico State.
So you were in the fine arts, the humanities and fine arts philosophy. Did you go straight here?
There was a little bit of time where I was, what am I doing with my life? And in that time period, I graduated, and I actually became a volunteer here at the radio station. The weekend I graduated Chico State.
Volunteer, not even an intern? Volunteer.
Not even an intern, volunteered. Yeah. I was doing radio shows and cleaning up the music library, the stacks and stuff like that, until a opportunity came up to apply for a part-time position, and with me being around a lot.
Why did you do that?
Why did I? Because I love the music. I love what we've got here,
Have you played? Do you play an instrument, or what was the calling for you?
So growing up, I was in a very musical family. My mom always sang in the choir, churches on Sundays, and traveling choirs. Me, I was a trombone player. And being a trombonist in high school, I was in a ska reggae band in high school. And then when I came to Chico State, I did a jazz improv class with some of the professors here. And I did the music just for fun. And so I stuck with it the entire time and graduated with a minor in ethics, a major in philosophy, and a certificate in teaching critical thinking.
So it sounds like you went to this direction and you just didn't want to leave this. You were attracted to something here.
Absolutely, I was. I love this area. This part of Northern California is something very special. It's very unique. And then when I got involved with the radio station, it kind of dug my feet into this area that much more. Something I always talk about when I go to talks with KCSC, the Chico State radio station, or even with other university bodies, is that if you want to know what Chico's up to and the North State's up to, getting involved with KZFR is going to be the best way to change your college experience. You'll learn so much about this community, things that kind of go over the standard college student hype and sort of scene. And it's the local scene that really drives what we've got going on here.
There's a lot of folks that want to think that maybe it's college and then it's internship, or maybe I'm not that person and I'm going to bypass that, or I have to bypass that, or I can't afford that, or why would I do that? And all those questions come up, I think, for a lot of folks that are watching this. It's like, what's my best path, and do I have to go through all those kinds of things to figure it out? But in a lot of ways, what you're saying is get involved with the community.
Yeah, it's the best way to say it. Get involved with the community. We are a tight-knit community here, especially after some of the things that we've experienced and with the natural catastrophes and stuff like that. It's made us even tighter.
So some of you know that in 2018, 2019, there was a fire that happened in a place called Paradise. It's not far from it. It's about 20 minutes from here in Northern California. A lot of those folks lost their homes and they had to really come over here. What happened was there's this heart and soul of a community that was really part of a region that was something. Now, why do you care if you're in music? Well, communities matter. Because if you're going to make yourself someone that is going to move forward, if you're thinking only as a digital native and you're missing this, I think you're missing something big, which is connecting with people. So folks that went through the campfire and went through Paradise, or were in Chico, they become part of a bond. And when you can tell a story with a heart and soul and a story and things that people have been through, when we have something to talk about, we move to the arts. And when we move to the arts, we're saying something matters to people. When you say something and sing something and connect with people about what matters to people, that really makes a difference.
It does, and it's part of the story of this area, and it contributes so much to the arts and culture of this area as well. Whether it's the musicians putting out the songs, some of the nonprofits that are supporting some of those affected by the campfires, but then, KZFR in general, it was just there as much as we could to bring some stress relief. I was here in the office that day. My wife is a teacher up in Paradise, so she gave me a phone call saying, yeah, I think there's a fire up here. And so by the time I came to the station for my morning shift, things were already going quite badly. Yeah. And so we found it as our moral imperative to make sure that we're getting the information out as fast as we can about road closures, how to safely get to an evacuation center, where to find this information.
Your radio and your real time for people.
Exactly.
Radio is one of the fastest information you get. You go onto a streaming service or whatever, you're waiting 2 to 4 hours to 3 days to look on YouTube to get information, kind of thing, right? If you're digital natives, right?
People experience that once a bunch of the power went out. What also goes out is your ability to get good cell reception and to Google Maps and things like that, right. Because now that there's less Wi-Fi towers, right. Everyone's also trying to use the same restricted resources, and so we found that
just goes dead.
Yep.
Radio doesn't die.
Yep, we found that our best way is just to provide that information to everyone in real time as fast as possible.
And if you're thinking, why does this relate to music? Radio is part of culture. Music is part of culture. Artists are part of culture. If I want to go back 50 years, I can say artists are still part of culture. We can still say this is like a social message. This is the kind of thing that happens when we're talking about Vietnam and 50 years ago, to then talking about what's happening in the culture in the moment right now. When it comes to a heart and culture and a soul and those kinds of things, our artists and our music starts to connect with people. And radio is one of those closest, fastest things that delivers that can give us that for meaning besides timing.
And we value that at KZFR too. We are live and local, so not a lot of our programs are pre-recorded or preempted coming from somewhere else. It's people who are in the studio, just like right now when we're recording this, doing something they're passionate about, and that passion bleeds through the radio. It's more than just a job, as cliche as that sounds. At KZFR, I just find that there's something so special about it that needs to be catered to and that needs to be taken care of. It needs to be fostered, because where we are at our 32-year journey right now, so there's so many places to grow, and all I want to do is just make the radio station the best we can and get people involved as much as we can as well, whether it's a nonprofit, a DJ, or even a musician coming in to play on one of our live shows. It's about getting our community involved. And it motivates me.
Does that feel like KZFR in general? Is that like a culture? Like, it's not just you, it's others that are really thinking about Chico and Chico community. You said nonprofit, but it's like, what do I do to bring in this DJ or talk about this scene that's part of our culture? Is that like sort of like label wide, company wide, radio wide?
Community involvement is paramount to the success of the radio station. As a community resource that we can, as I mentioned, provide information in some of the scenarios like I just mentioned, but we also get to entertain people. And you never know who's going to be an amazing DJ until you reach out to them and say, hey, have you ever thought about doing this before?
Right.
Getting them involved,
the
best way to do it.
Right. When I first moved to Chico, there was this paper that has a digital presence, Chico News and Review. And somebody told me about it because I think it was my real estate agent when I was moving here from Los Angeles. I was living there for 27 years. We're going to go find a home. And he starts talking about, do you want to know what's going on in town and where you go eat and where you need a back rub, kind of thing. It was like all this different things. You need to fix your car, check out Chico News and Review. They do this thing annually, the best of. So I just read the best of 2022 was KZFR. Yeah. So there's something that's going on here that the community is reflecting back to KZFR as working.
And we're grateful for it. It really is so motivating that we do get awards like Best of Chico in 2022.
Which means that's your community coming back to you saying thank you. You gave us something we need.
Yeah, and it feels great and it's humbling at the same time. We've been fortunate enough to have a great community response in that Best of Chico, where we've actually won it at least 10 times in the past 10 years.
I know who's my audience right now, and I understand that some of you might think that I'm giving you an ad. What's happening is somewhere between a writer and a community, they're reflecting back that you matter to us. If there's an us, that means there's a community that cares. Musicians, if there's a community that cares about a radio station that's playing something that's about a community, you should not ignore that. So now your programming is affecting the community, but it's not just the programming of like, what were the hit records in the top 40s, or what was the only this rock or only this R&B, or whatever these radio segments can be otherwise. Yeah. Instead of thinking this is something on the shelf or irrelevant, actually this is a reflection of the community. The community just said thank you for being part of us, playing us, being part of us, making some music is about us. Now, aspiring musicians, aspiring professionals, why does that matter to you? Can you connect the dots? Help me.
Well, if you're an aspiring musician, we all know how difficult it is to break through on things like Spotify and all of those major digital streaming platforms. You know, you're almost going to have that label base and able to break out really tough. One of the things that community radio stations like KZFR offer is cult followings of fan bases. There are artists that aren't getting played on the commercial radio stations that we're playing. Not because someone told us to, it's because the DJ likes that track. Yeah. You know, they like that track and they want to share it with everyone. And so there's...
That's what radio was always about.
Oh yeah, so there's such a world for aspiring musicians out there greater than social media and just like streaming. We have bands that we've booked for so many different types of concerts that aren't played on mainstream radio.
You guys are taking care of the local scene and the local musicians and those kinds of things and being part of a total scene.
We want to be, you know, we want to make sure that these musicians are successful. You know, with every band and every musician, they start at a localized core. Right. And it's that localized core, that localized fan base, that organic fan base that can really help them grow. And that's what we want to do here at the radio station. We book national touring acts, but we also book local acts as well.
When you say book, you mean for the radio play, or you book them for something else?
Concerts and fundraisers at venues around the area. Just had a Halloween jamboree where we just filled it with local bands and put them over at the El Rey Theater. Yeah. So that those bands could be on a big stage with some nice elbow room, some big lights and big sound, yeah, so we can stoke them out.
They might be only 150, they might up to 800 that night.
Yeah.
Right next door, by the way. This is really close to over here. Mm-hmm. There's another podcast episode, if you haven't already seen it, with Jake, that's over at the El Rey, talking about when we're booking things for a room, like that kind of thing. So I guess this is important to me because we're talking about something from a regional perspective for the aspiring musician, the aspiring performer. You guys are booking things together with venues, and you're thinking about a community.
Absolutely.
And if anybody's missing this, thinking it's all about Spotify or your SoundCloud page, you're missing something, which is about people through a radio station and a local venue, which is kind of big time for where you are. And they'll believe in you when you bring something of value back to your own community.
The response that we get from the local bands for the support is it's great. I'm thankful that it's happening. I'm grateful that we can be in a position where we can have local bands performing at concerts for themselves, where they get, you know, some exposure out of it, they get some work out of it. Right. And then when their album is gonna come out, we have a show here on the station that's a live music show where they come in, set up all the instruments, and they can talk about the album in real time with the people that they're really connecting with.
And what opportunity did you just say that you could do? So if you could book these kinds of things, then they could, and you actually get this booking, then we can put you on air, then we can connect all these dots and so forth. All boats rise. You added value to the audience, you added value to the artist, you added value to the community, you added value to the radio station and the venue. This is all boats rise when you do it right.
Totally. For decades, on every Saturday, we've had a live music show that focuses on live performances, local bands. It is Saturday from 1:30 to 3, and it's called Studio 416.
On that, right there.
1:30 to 3, it's an hour-and-a-half long program. And we try to keep up with the times too. We've got our archive, so if you're not listening right at that current moment, right, all is not lost. It doesn't just go into the ether. Right. You know, right on our website, kzfr.org, we've got an archive tab where you can listen back to some of these live programs.
Right. Because in a lot of ways, Chico's like an island. This is what I found out. We're about an hour away from Redding if you go north, which is not big. South of us is like almost 2, not quite 2, is Sacramento. It feels like it's an island because there's nothing east-west, which means it's a culture and a community that's living in its own space and time. And a lot of the ways, the reason why I care about that is because there's a lot of that all around the United States. KZFR, right? 32 years is a long time in a community that thinks you matter, and I think they're right.
It is, and the fact that we've been as successful as we have in these past 32 years is literally astounding. You know, we're fortunate to have a community resource like KZFR in our area. In the entire United States, there's only about 250 community radio stations. So not every city has one, not every area has one. Some states might only have 2 or 3 in the entire state. And so we're fortunate enough to have something like this here that was started as a sort of somewhat of an activist rebellion against what was, mainstream radio and the content that was being shared, especially when it comes to the news and public affairs as it relates to international politics and the wars we were in 32 years ago, sort of spawned this need to we can do something that's unique to us. We can do something that's unique to the North State, unique to Chico, Yuba City, and all of the surrounding cities that we broadcast to. As you mentioned, sort of sometimes the Chico can be like an island, and that geographical sort of island that we live in has helped foster something within that bubble, right?
And when it comes to music, it's really an indie music scene, which is really great for those that are coming up, and there's a culture that's here and wants to support that. So KZFR has been sitting in the middle of all that.
Yeah, we've been a great tool for local bands for decades. One of the big famous local bands is bands like the Mother Hips, for example, on KZFR when they started. Bands like Mystic Roots on KZFR when they started.
Here, so I don't know Mother Hips and Mystic Roots. Tell me more.
They would come to KZFR to not only play some of their music when they could, but also to give KZFR their records. When their record would drop, they would come to the station, drop off 5 CDs for the different DJs to play, and to just build that vibe, build an organic fan base that can't be replicated.
After 32 years, KZFR has a lot of credibility that when you're trying to build something, frankly, when they give you a nod, and there's a community that's been following them, that community just gave you the nod. And that's the story, and that's the story that everybody wins from. So if you're an aspiring professional, I just said, you want to work at a place like KZFR, or you want to be in that band, or you want to be part of that community, or you want to tell that story, and all boats rise off of that. Because you can take that to say you move to the next place where you're going to start touring. And you're going to tour regionally. But this is your legitimacy. This is your base. This is the people that believe in you and testify for you that becomes part of your digital story as well as your local and your regional story.
And for aspiring music industry professionals, somewhere like a community radio station is a great place to sort of cut your teeth and to sort of learn some of the basics that you might not have learned in the classroom. It's real life experience. We've had people.
I'm in the classroom. I can't teach what you teach.
We've had people that have started as interns, they've become DJs, and then they've gone on to be board operators and broadcasters for ESPN, some of the Clear channels, some of the larger market, larger corporations, but they learned how to do that here, locally. And so there's something in there, whether you are interested in becoming a broadcaster, a program director, or even someone who's not necessarily playing the instruments and making all of the sound effects happen. There's a community radio station is a great place.
Broadcasting and business and legal and all of the things
that
cross over to all of our business.
Oh yeah, RF text, licensing, everything in between. It all exists right here at a radio station.
Like it or not, you think this is sexy or not, this is all part of business. Those kinds of things become part of your resume. What if they were musicians, they want to learn from this? What are they going to learn?
If you're a musician, what you can learn is sort of some of the background of the music industry. You can practice your instrument of choice, you can put out the record, but there's a lot of things behind the scene by working and interning or even volunteering at KZFR that you'll learn some of that background process. Once upon a time, it was the standard procedure to make 100 CDs and mail one out to 100 different radio stations. That scene has changed now. More often than not, we have people sending us electronic press kits now, where instead of having a CD that we then get to put into the stacks of new ads, we're adding them into a digital music library where people are using our automation to pull them up. And even we're sharing that information with our DJs, because more often than not, when that EPK comes across the emails, they're like, and if you're interested in interviewing, here's the number to call. Here's Joe Blow, the manager.
EPK sounds like you know what you're talking about, electronic press kit.
Yep.
When it shows up for you, what do you need to say and not do you need to see?
Well, we want to see quickly how to get your music and how to listen to it and what kind of artist you are. Because as a program director, that gives you the best idea of which DJs to forward it to immediately to get the most likely playback on the radio. It's got to be concise, it's got to have good working links, If you send me something, I click on a link and the link is dead, next.
Right.
And so there's got to be that level of professionalism that ties everything together so that then when I'm looking at your electronic press kit, it can give me a good energy and a good feeling about the music that I'm going to play is going to sort of fit into what we've got here at KZFR.
Got it.
It'd be important to let me know that, hey, this is a blues musician who sounds like X, Y, and Z. He's got something out with A, B, C, and I think you might like him. Here's the link.
Press kits have been around for a while, and they were usually sent from PR people, right? Electronic press kit is obviously more convenient than sending a press kit, but in a lot of ways, it could be replaced by a one sheet. Is a one sheet just as good for you, or do you want a little bit more than that? A one sheet that has a picture, that's the key picture, it has a couple of key things about what's happened and a couple of key links, and tells you the story in one line of the bio, right?
When they send us the one sheet, usually when the one sheet comes, it's in the mail with the CD. And so that's sort of something that we do. We play CDs because I know a lot of our volunteers and DJs have a large collection.
You actually like CDs.
Yeah, but
want them to be sent to you.
Yeah, but I can't imagine that that's going to be the way that they would approach things like Hot 97 or something like that in the major markets. So I often think about how it's being sent to me and what the one sheet looks like. It does make a huge difference.
Obviously, that's going to be a CDR for any independent band, right? Does that bother you? That it's not artwork and it's not on the CD and it's not artwork in a jewel box? It's a CD. You actually want a CD.
Well,
If they put a Sharpie on a CD, is that better than sending you a link to an MP3 on SoundCloud?
If I get the Sharpie on CD, I wonder if it's licensed or not, which means if it's not licensed, I can't play it.
How much time does that person really have, the program director, the DJ, to really listen to that? If I got 12 of those, do I have time for that? If I got 25 of those, do I have time for that? What do I have to do to make sure that I can cut through the noise and get to the point?
As a DJ, we love a pre-release. We love getting it before everyone else does. And so if you've got something that's a pre-release that
Like
gives,
exclusives.
that gives our
gave
community
us
radio
an
station,
exclusive.
KZFR or a radio station is able to play that song and get hype for it, and especially if it's an artist that you're familiar with. Familiarity has a lot to do with it. Knowing the artist ahead of time helps. However, there's been times where I've old school gotten the CD and I go, okay, this looks interesting. Put it in. It's been one of my favorite records.
What if you had 30 of those and how much time do you have?
It's hard, not a
can't
lot.
get through all of it?
No, you can't get through
So
all of
what-
it, and sometimes
so
it takes, because we're wading through so many EPKs on a given basis, the concisity, the professionalism of the outline, and how it all looks makes a huge difference. It's separate from the actual musicianship, but that's something that will make me spend that extra little bit of time where it's like, okay, is this a now listen or a later listen?
Yeah.
And the professional
if ever.
outline can make the difference.
Later,
Unfortunately.
because you get
Unfortunately it
overwhelmed,
is.
right?
Yeah.
Because there's only so much time in your day. Yeah.
And that's one of the good things about having as many DJs as we have, is that sometimes that weight load gets spread between several people. Sometimes we have 4 hosts on a program. They each do it once a month. And so the person might have an entire month to go through all the stuff that we're sending. So that's what's beneficial to the artists who are submitting the EPKs to us. Is that we've got the time to be able to listen to it ahead of time.
And that's a gift of the fact that you're regional and independent in a lot of ways, and you care as an organization. Besides a person, you care. How far does it go? This is now from Tulsa. Do you treat the same, or do you really think about your region?
We are playing a lot of national, touring acts that aren't from the state, the region, maybe even the country. However, a lot of those ones that we're playing that are from out of state and out of the country, they're not necessarily always the mainstream artists. And so even if you're not Billy Strings or someone like that, you can still find space and find a following on these types of radio stations, because we're the ones that are playing that type of music.
Okay, KZFR is not a college radio station. You do have to make this thing work, right?
yeah.
There's people with real jobs here. You know,
Yeah.
where I'm sitting with you right now, where Grant is working right now, who's been here for 12 years, and Sanjay over there has got a show going on, and all these rooms and all this kind of stuff. This is a real business that's going on. We still need something to hit for their needs, but at the same time, what their needs are is to feed an audience, and when the audience responds, they get paid and get to keep working. And it's a symbiotic relationship in a lot of ways. You do need regions because the region is who's listening to a local station, even though there's a .org that goes right after this. So how many people are actually listening to KZFR.org versus 90.1 FM, which is, this is analog, this is AM, FM, terrestrial radio, as we sometimes call it.
Scanning on the dial, yeah.
Right. How many people are listening to analog and terrestrial versus digital?
We'll have an average of between 600 and 1,000 people, new listeners every 15 minutes.
Every 15 minutes. So they're commuters to home listeners, and it's the car, it's the device.
Oh yeah, and we see a lot of people listening for multiple hours at a time, 3, 4, 5, and 6 hours at a time, because what they'll do is we have long blocks of programming, 2.5, 3 hour long shows, and the people will turn it on and just enjoy their program while maybe they do some dishes or work in the garden or be in their office.
Right. You're not just doing a drive time kind of thing, because in LA, for a lot of my life, when I was listening to radio, I was listening to it in the car, because I was stuck there for 45 minutes on a regular drive. You've got folks that are listening to you for the programming purpose and not just for the drive kind of time. Yeah. But there's still more on that part of the station than they are the digital part of it, the .org part.
That is correct. You know, we still have a lot of listeners who are listening on us via KZFR.org, our apps for like Android and iPhone, and also through all the other streaming platforms that are out there, things like TuneIn Radio. You know, we acknowledge that we need to be a part of that digital scene as well, and especially if it's catering to people outside of our FM range.
So is it TuneIn Radio? I know about iHeartRadio and those others that can pick up like the local radio station and make it part of a conglomerate. So you feel like you're at home even if you left. Or what are those other apps that are picking up KZFR right now?
You know, we have apps like Spinatron, Radio.net is picking us up. We're not an iHeart station, so we're not on any of those iHeart.com channels or anything like that. You know, iHeart is a company, a conglomerate, and a brand within itself. So when
And they're exclusive.
oh yeah, when people ask all the time, people ask like, "Hey, I tried to find you on iHeart."
But it's not a platform.
Exactly.
It's a closed system.
Yep.
Interesting.
Whether it's music or our news and public affairs program, they're curated with passion by local folks you'll run into at farmers market, at the grocery store. Some of them are working at Chico State like yourself, and some of them, you know, have all different types of jobs. But it's all about the passion, it's all about the sharing and keeping the community involved. You mentioned earlier that we've been on for 32 years, and that's been possible because of the support of our listeners. You know, we do pledge drives, we have car donation programs, we do record swaps, we put on concerts, we do underwriting, which is sort of our version, nonprofit for advertising. And so, yeah, we're definitely community funded, and we don't get to sort of nestle underneath a larger organization that sort of sponsors us.
This is independently controlled, but large group within Chico. Yeah. How is this all organized? How does this work?
We are an independent station. We consider ourselves very grassroots. We're different than a lot of NPR stations. That's important to note too. A lot of people think a community radio station and an NPR station are the same, and they're actually not.
National public radio?
Yeah, sometimes they're owned by universities and things like that, and then sometimes you see what you mentioned where you've got one company that owns 5 different radio stations. So one building has 5 different little radio in a room,
every major
right?
market, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
And so we're able to do what we do because we've got a board of directors. Right now our board of directors consists of about 9 different individuals from not only Chico, but also Paradise, Yuba City, everywhere in our broadcast range. Our signal goes just north of the Sacramento airport. So we're hitting Marysville, we're hitting Yuba City, and so we want people from that area who are listening and who are responding to us to be a part of our organization as well. And so that's what we've done with our board of directors. We've got a small 5-person staff, but we've got over 90 volunteers. here at this station. And that's how we're able to keep those meters moving. Because throughout the years, we've had some people that have been here for 30, we've had some that just started last year, but people are always wanting to get involved. We're always encouraging people to get involved, and that's what's allowing us to do what we do.
90 volunteers? Why do they want to do that?
They love music, they love being on the radio. Sometimes it's someone who grew up listening to the radio and they always wanted the opportunity, but you know, they had to work a job for their next 40 years of life. So now they're retired and they're getting that opportunity to do something they've always wanted to do. They've been collecting the music for 40 years and now they get to give it a try.
So it's that seasoned vet that knows music. That's part of the volunteers, but it's also young people that want to be part of music. And right now it isn't about the money for them yet. Or it's something, anything between. They already have a job, but this is their passion point. That sounds like music in a lot of ways.
It is.
We're not all amateurs, you know, we're not all volunteers, but volunteers and amateurs and doers and all of the above are all part of what makes this an art and a culture and a scene that matters, right?
And because we're volunteer based doesn't mean that we can't put out a professional sound. We're putting out a professional sound, and and it's what we love to do. You know, we strive to be an arts and cultural epicenter and a reliable source of news and information for the North State, and that's done by the passion of our volunteers, whether they're coming in to talk about local issues happening at City Council, all the above.
And KZFR.org, okay? KZFR.org. Go look at it and go look at their events page. Now, maybe I'm biased because I think about events, those kinds of things. But I also think from my audience's point of view, that's what they'll connect with. If they don't know the rest of this, or they're hearing you and they get it, if they want to see it, how this truly is community-based, go to KZFR.org and go to those events page and just see how many things that they're actually telling you about that's happening in our community. There's a lot of folks that I think are missing something, which is the importance of radio when we're in 2022. So many people think that this is old school, that this is not important. And I think they're missing something.
I agree.
That's the way I think. Maybe it's because I grew up in the 20th century and I've seen what the symbiotic relationships between radio, records, and artists and audiences. I see it and it's not gone. What are they missing?
Well, I think they're just overlooking. They're thinking that, oh, if I'm on the streaming platforms, I'm everywhere, and everyone can find me wherever they want. But you're also in a highly competitive area because everyone can find everyone and everywhere, right? And they're missing the fact that by sharing your music with community radio listeners, you're getting a dedicated fan base that is going to respond better to you and sort of, because it's being presented by a presenter on air versus a platform, you've got a personality sort of vouching for what you as the artist have made so that then they share it with everyone, which is unique and different than if you just have a playlist on random and it just pops up.
To me, in a lot of ways, what you're saying, I feel like I talk to my students about this. You could throw a beautiful grain of sand on the beach, but there's a beach everywhere, and there's grains of sand everywhere. Now, why are you special? You know, so someone vouching for you in a local way really makes sense to me. In a lot of ways, that's a community and a story and a culture and a space, but it's region and it's people. So those are basics. There's so many more things to marketing, but if you're not studying marketing, then you don't have to care. I'm saying there's one demographic that can be easily missed, which is the people that are around you.
A lot of us community radio DJs are listening to DJs on other radio stations. So we're in a sort of non-commercial sort of hype network where all of a sudden I'll be listening to a show from Mendocino, for example, with some artist I've never heard before that my buddy Larry played. And I'll be like, oh, that's a sweet track. And then, you know, maybe a couple weeks I'll end up playing it on my show. And that's how something builds organically in sort of this community radio world.
And that's where the venue and the touring starts to matter, because you said Mendocino, that's Northern California. It's not far. For Mendocino or Chico, but all of a sudden this is starting to hit, and now you got a little network. And what do you see what the network does? You know, that matters.
I agree. Yeah, a like and a share and a repost on social media, you know, it's definitely great for the business of music, but when you're a musician and someone says, yo, that was a great show the other night, or I heard you on the radio the other day.
There's something fulfilling.
Motivating.
There's something really fulfilling. It feels like you're part of something, right?
Absolutely.
And that storytelling and that heart and the soul is what music does, which is what communities do, that frankly, as I worked at Universal Music Group, the biggest record company in the world, we pick up on. This is what we care about. You know, when you go, oh, you connect with people, you know? So you're saying you really offer that in a lot of ways.
We always do, yeah. We definitely try
That's what you
to
care
make
about.
ourselves as accessible to our community as possible.
Right. Grant, you graduated 12 years ago from Chico State. I'm just only there a few years. In a lot of ways, you represent somebody that has gone through kind of being in college, with or without college, you know, those kinds of folks that want to just believe in it, make something happen, be part of music and be part of a scene and those kinds of things. I appreciate you very much for just kind of representing that for who might be watching that of the next gen that could either work here, learn from you, be part of it, might want to feed something musically and so forth. And I want to thank you for doing that, man, and being part of this today. You know, big ups.
Bless.